What's good, y'all? Jarod Hector, and I'm here with my boys, Bryan, Fonseca, and Dexter Henry. We are going to get into some NBA talk right now. Specifically, fellas, I want to talk about Damian Lillard and this conversation that's happening around him right now in the NBA bubble. For people that don't know, and I mean, look, if you don't know, I don't know where y'all been at. This dude has been literally lighting the bubble on fire. Like, if I had to describe him as like a character, he is Human Torch right now, right? Like his whole entire body is literally on fire. That's how good he's playing right now. And he single-handedly has dragged the Portland Trailblazers into the playoffs because the rest of them dudes have been meh, okay, right? So Damian has been, doing his thing. He had a game against the Clippers recently, a little back and forth with Paul George and Patrick Beverley and blah, blah, blah. And I saw something on Twitter, and Van Lathan said this, the Ringer's Van Lathan. He said, Damian Lillard is the people's champ in so many ways. And I thought that was such an interesting statement to have. And I want to talk with you guys about it again because I know that you'd be able to offer the kind of perspective we want in the nuance, right? Not is Dame the best point guard in the league, all that. But that statement is the people's champ in so many ways. And I find this fascinating because what it taps into is something that we all do as humans, right? And I think we see ourselves simultaneously as David and Goliath at the same time. And it's so fucking strange to me, right? It's like, because in many ways, Dame is David, right? Like, he is a small dude in a big man's game, right? Yet, everyone is like, oh, LeBron, oh, in the back of the day, Michael Jordan, right? You also see yourself as that Goliath. How do you guys sort of reconcile that in your brains? It's like, we love David and we love Goliath at the same time. How do we see ourselves as both?
I actually want to focus on the people's champ part of it first because if you really think about it, all right, look at the people that kind of get associated with that. They all tend to be excellent at their craft, but also fan favorites, but also people struggle at putting them, not people, those people, but the mainstream quote unquote struggles putting them number one in certain areas. I've heard Nas be associated with this title in hip hop. I've heard, obviously, The Rock. He's given himself this title in wrestling. But I've heard Daniel Bryan was that once. Kofi Kingston was that once.
Wait, really quick. Go back to that. The Rock calls himself the people's champion, but I wouldn't call him a David. He's a Goliath.
He called himself the people's champion, but really Stone Cold was the people's champion. Like, that was the guy that everybody gravitated to, who was closer to the common man, so to speak, because he drank beer. He didn't have a lot of fancy wrestling moves. Whereas The Rock, for example, like The Rock comes in, he's a former college athlete.
And he's also a fourth generation wrestler. Like
University of Miami, listed 6'5", 275, and now he's the biggest action star in the world. So is he really the people's champion? Not in the way like a Kofi Kingston was, who was a smaller dude who won the WWE title, who was black.
Yeah, had to be the small guy to be the people's champion for years.
No, but that's what it is, because that's how most people kind of associate themselves. Like, you would never call LeBron a people's champion or Kevin Durant a people's champion.
I don't like that, man. Why can't the tall brothers be the people's champion? Why can't we be the people's champion?
Seriously, because they're too big. They're not relatable to
that's height discrimination, bro.
The mass amount of fans. I don't think you could be tall and be the people's champion unless you have some sort of physical ailment that you're.
What if you're tall and skinny? Like, does Bol become the people's champion? Because he's not with the frame that everybody likes. He can't be the people's champion?
His dad was
I feel bad for Bol.
His dad was a great basketball player.
I feel bad. But go back to...
Going off topic.
Yeah, but I want to go back to my point, though, right? Okay, you made an excellent point, Bryan, about the small guys. But LeBron is overwhelmingly loved by the majority of basketball fans, right? Like, he's that dude. So people are like, yo, LeBron, this, that. So again, how are you David and Goliath simultaneously?
I think a lot of that has to do with its story, right? We always talk about narrative and stuff in sports. And for LeBron, he was supposed to be that dude, chosen one, the king on Sports Illustrated when he was 14 or whatever that was, et cetera, et cetera. So Dame does have a very underdog, likable story. And I'll be honest, look, I like Dame for that, right? He did his 4 years at a very small school. He came into NBA. He kills it. People, I don't even want to call
small college is another thing.
Yeah, I think that helps too. Small college is definitely part of that narrative. I don't necessarily call Dame, I wouldn't call him humble, but he walks around with a confidence that I happen to love because I really like confident people. And he also, in this case of what you brought up, Jarod, with the Paul George situation, he can snap and fire back, and it's witty and it comes with facts, and I like that. I like when people deliver like that. There's a lot of things about Dame that I see as being likable to and endearing to people. And I do, I'm joking with Bryan, but I do think height is a factor, and I do think people like to root for the smaller guy, the underdog. People probably like to root for Bryan more than they like to root for me. I don't know why.
No.
It's just necessarily short.
I don't think that's the case. I actually think you're more likable than I am. I actually want to pose a question to both of you guys. Is Damian Lillard the NBA's Omar Little? Because I think Omar is the people's champion of The Wire if you want to go that route, right? He seems to be 100%. Everybody's favorite character.
Yeah, I don't know anybody doesn't like him.
But here's the thing, but would you call Omar an underdog?
Yeah, I would say so because he doesn't belong to any organization.
He's a lone wolf. He's a lone wolf man.
But see, because he's his own man, I don't necessarily call him an underdog. Here's the thing about Omar and The Wire, not to spoil anything for anybody with this, and I won't spoil anything for anybody. I'm just going to say, I'm not necessarily sure you're ever rooting for him watching the show. Like, really? You're kind of on his side. I don't know if you're rooting. Rooting is, I never felt that way. Rooting's a little bit different. There's other people I rooted for in that show that I really wanted to see win. Omar's like, yo, he's doing his business. I don't necessarily think he's wrong. I don't necessarily think everything he does is right. I understand it. He's part of the game. That's kind of always looked at it. He was just in the game, and I looked at it that way. I don't know if I rooted for him, and I think that's why when something happens in the show, to not spoil anything for people, I think that's why for me, I was like, that made sense.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of what Damian Lillard sort of is, right? Like, he's not like the whole reason he got on Paul George, among other things, was he told them like, yo, you keep running from the grind. Like, you went on this team, you went on this team, you went on this team. And Damian Lillard, who's Omar, kind of just stays on his own the entire time. He's stuck with Portland. He's stuck
go ahead, Jarod.
I want to tap into that because that's an important part to me. Number one, and I don't look. When did we get to this point where we look at championships and winning a championship as if you do it the Lillard way, it's somehow worth 2x versus if you do it the Durant way, it's only worth 0.5x, right? Like, when did we get to that point where we're adding what the multiplier is on a championship? Yo, newsflash, a championship is hard regardless. I will remind everyone, the Kevin Durant Warriors were down to the Houston Rockets 3-2, and we're down in Game 7 in the fourth quarter. It ain't like they breathe. Everybody's like, oh, they were inevitable. Look, yes, the final score said they beat the Cavs in 5. Go back to all those games. They didn't blow them out. Yo, those games were all close. So what's this idea of, you got to struggle to win a title? Like, everyone struggles to win a title. It's not easy.
Yeah, right. But you brought up the point about 2010. Well, I was saying in 2010, I think is the time when it shifted. Once LeBron and the Big Three came together, and you had all that conversation around that about, is this the way you win a championship and this and this. I will put it very simply why I think all that talk is absolutely stupid. If you want to, or I want to work someplace else to change and better our life, or think it's a better opportunity for us, we are free to do that, and nobody would judge us. And people would say that's great for labor and free capitalism and all this other stuff. But when it comes to athletes, people want to restrict them and act like it's some more pure or noble to have struggled, or if an organization isn't doing the best by you. If your job isn't doing the best by you, so you excel, and you say, peace, I'm going to go someplace else, there is nothing wrong with that. And that's all this is in sports. It's a job where people are trying to compete and win and be at the best that they want to do. Now, if Dame wins in Portland, and if that's part of his value system, I am not judging him for that. I think it's about what your value system is. The same way, if it's part of Kevin Durant's value system where he wants to go here or there, that's also fine. But I agree with you, Jarod. The point of it being worth 2 times more because you did it the pure way or stayed at home, it's stupid, it's ridiculous. I do think thoughts on that are changing, just the way people had idiotic thoughts a a long time ago about you can't win with a scoring point guard, and then along came Steph Curry. And who is anybody saying you can't win with Dame Lillard? Notice how that conversation's gone totally silent.
Here's the thing, though. Fundamentally, I agree with both of you guys, as you know.
Here comes the but.
But yes, the perception though from people is what they want to see, and again, going back to people's champion.
Man, F all that.
The driving thing that drives people's champion is relatability, and people can't relate to the best player or arguably the best player in the world jumping on the best team in the world going out and win a championship. They want to see somebody like a Damian.
You know why? Because most people are suckers and ain't excellent. That's why.
Word.
That's why.
That tells a lot about them. It says a lot about them and their confidence.
But that's a larger conversation too. A lot of people, 90% of people aren't going to identify with Kevin Durant or LeBron James. They're going to identify with the smaller dude. They're going to identify with Isaiah Thomas dropping 30. Remember how popular he was that season when he was with the Boston Celtics.
That's true.
And then he loses his sister in the playoffs, so people relate to him
the human
more.
Story.
Like what people want is that level of relatability, and what they really want is somebody who just kind of sticks with whoever it may be, whatever situation it is, and them to win it that way, the way Damian Lillard is trying to. Now, the thing is, most of those people, if they had the opportunity, they'll probably go on the team that's better, better suited to win a championship, quote unquote, whatever it is, winning a championship in your field of choice. But they're going to look at it in a different way because they don't see sports as real life like the way you guys are saying. They see sports as sports. They see real life as real life. They want sports as an escape from real life, and you guys know that that's true.
It is interesting.
If you want to escape from real life, why would you not want to escape to maybe be a fan of the person that is not like you, right? Like, why are you trying to get the same thing? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right about the way people are looking at Bryan. When I say that, I'm not coming at you. I'm saying it doesn't.
But let me just say, you can't rationalize irrational people. Like, that's the main thing about all of this.
And you hit the nail on the head.
How people think, but again, I don't think I identify with 90% of people. That's me talking personally. You know what I'm saying?
You hit the nail on the head, though, Bryan. It is about the way in which we, the collective we, not us three, but the collective we as a society, how we identify ourselves through sports, and how so much of what we see in sports we think is a reflection of ourselves, right? But in actual reality, it is not, right? Because none of us are at the top half or 1% of our profession like people in the NBA are, like professional athletes are. That's not what that is, right? But that's just how we see it, because these were all games that all of us played at some level when we were quote unquote kids and children, right? So there's this disconnect, this cognitive dissonance going on, being like, yeah, but I play that game, so why isn't it going X, Y, and Z like this? But you touched on something, Dex, about narrative, and I think narrative is so key. So with Lillard, and I've always said this about certain guys in the league, Lillard is afforded and can have that perspective of, I'm not running from the grind, and I'm going to stay with Portland because, as we mentioned earlier, 4-year player out of Weber State, wasn't expected to do spit when he came into this league. So everything he's done up to this point is better than anybody except for Dame himself thought he would be. So if he never wins a title, no one's going to get on him about that because he wasn't supposed to be this good any damn way. But a guy like Kevin Durant, LeBron James, them fools had to win titles. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They don't win? Nah, you a chump, you ain't this, you ain't that. And so the pressures and the way in which they look at themselves and what should I do is far different than Dame. They got to be like, look, I got to win this title now so I can get these dudes off my back. Dame's like, I'm good. I'm going to just keep doing me.
Because it's never been better for him. And I'm not saying this as a knock to Dame, because I like Dame, than it is right now. And I think with all that, when you take that context and when you look at it with that sort of nuance and realize the reality of that, the People's Champ is kind of overrated sometimes. The People's Champ is overrated, like, because a lot of y'all are giving them passes that they don't. And if you talked about the point when it becomes that we were judging championships differently, well, then I think the question needs to become, when is the point of Dame Lillard, who we agree is a top 2, 3-point guard in this league? I think we all would agree on that. So, and he leads a team. When does it become the point that the pressure goes on him and you have to say, okay, you're now one of these elite dudes. You have to get it done. Because let's keep it real. Is Dame right now getting the same criticism that a Russell Westbrook would if he doesn't win with Houston? The answer is no. And you could say there's likability factors. I know Bryan will say that, and he'll be right. He'll be absolutely right. But what I'm saying is, Do you guys think Dame skates on this? I skate strong with that because I'm not saying Dame skates in it, but do you think the pressure definitely comes to him at a point where it's like, look, man, you got to win?
It's not like how it will for those other guys. And again, there's something in psychology called the anchoring effect, right?
Anchoring effect.
And
yep.
You know what that is, right? The first perception and sight you see of something, that's what it always is in your mind, regardless of what you see after the fact, right? Look at polls. Okay, let's say they do the college basketball poll, and you know how they always fuck up in the beginning and they rank some team too high. And so when that team fails to live up to the number 3 billing, but they're actually pretty good at 10, you're like, nah, they trash because they're not, because maybe they were placed wrong. Maybe 3 wasn't where they were supposed to be. Maybe 10 is what they were supposed to be, and they're a good 10. But because we first saw them at 3, we're like, you ain't that. Same thing with Dame, right? Again, Dame wasn't supposed to be anything.
Yeah.
Who thought he was going to be anything? Besides Damian Lillard and maybe his mom. Who thought he was going to be this nice?
And
Nobody.
Portland, they took him 6
Portland
overall.
took him. But Portland didn't think he was going to be all NBA like this, right? And so now,
I don't know.
Everything you get from Dame now is
gravy.
I mean, he already exceeded our expectations. We're
here's
good.
The thing, like where you start sort of matters, right? Like you brought up the starting point too. Look at how we view people in hip hop. Some people like Nas, he comes out the gate and he drops Illmatic, which some people say is the greatest album ever. Now for the rest of his career,
judged off
they
that.
hold him to that LeBron standard, be like, yo, Stillmatic was dope, but make another Illmatic. Godson was dope, make another Illmatic. The same thing happens, and it's going to happen with Kendrick Lamar if he drops a project at some point that's not quite as good as Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn were. Especially those first two, because those first two are legitimate classics. And then when you get into some of the other people, like, Kanye West is being held to that standard too, although he's not really a perfect example for other reasons. But he came out the gate with 3 good albums, and since then, he's gone crazy. And a lot of people are...
Listen, don't be talking shit about Dark Fantasy on here. Don't do that. Don't do that.
3 good ones, but you got to remember,
808s. You're going to get mad about
808s
that.
and Heartbreak was before Dark Twisted. 808's not to the level of any of those other 4.
808's actually a pretty good album, though. Like it's
solid.
It's not to the level of the
I
other
agree. It's not the level of the other 4. I agree with that.
Yeah. But it's not. I wouldn't call it a bad album by any means. But still, the point stands. It's like wherever you come out the gate, that's what people are going to hold you to. Like if you're the first overall pick, if you're LeBron James or if you're Kwame Brown, you're going to be held to that standard for the rest of your career. And LeBron had an obscenely higher standard because, as we mentioned, 16 years old, Sports Illustrated, et cetera, et cetera. So where you come in matters. So as you mentioned, Damian Lillard, everything he's doing right now is gravy. There will come a point where the other shoe's going to have to fall. But right now it's still, and this is legitimate. Like I wouldn't kill Dame for this. They had a ton of injuries. They're not the same team that they were last year on paper they weren't until at least recently. They have Carmelo Anthony being one of their key scorers at the end of games. CJ McCollum is hurt all of a sudden. They shouldn't have even been into the playoffs, and now they're probably going to get in. And Damian Lillard is also going crazy, and that's the main thing is that it's not like he's out here having a Russell Westbrook type of game where it's 20, 11, and 8 in a big spot, but he's shooting 4 for 18. Like he's getting 60-point games and 50-point games against other teams and taking down dudes single-handedly. And that stuff matters because at the end of the day, like, yes, on one level it's gravy, but on another level it's like, yo, you're producing way higher than not just we thought you were going to do, but higher than everybody else in the bubble right now, arguably.
But does that translate to winning? And that's what the question's going to be next. It's like, okay, that's all. Because it has to come a point where it's like, yo, 60-point games are cool, but if you're not winning, and I don't think that's all his fault. That's a lot of front office and other stuff too. I always like to try to be fair on that.
But that's the point, though. People understand that it's not all his fault.
I'm not sure people understand that all the time.
Well, no, I'm saying for right now, they understand it's not all his fault. Whatever the career retrospective is going to be, it is what it's going to be. But at some point, Portland's going to have to assemble talent. He's never had the talent yet where you put it around him and you're like, okay, Damian Lillard has to win, like Darren Williams had before when he was with the Nets. Darren Williams was one of the best point guards in the league when he was with Utah. They traded him to the Nets. He was still very good. They got the team around him. They had the pieces, and now it's like, oh, Darren Williams has pressure for the first time in his career. Let's see what he could do. And we saw what he did, and he did shit.
The other thing about this, too, to sort of wrap this part of the conversation, we judge these people by your ability to elevate your teammates, right?
Yes.
Do we think Dame is an elevator of his teammates? Dame is scoring 60.
They voted him. The players.
Do we think he's elevating his dudes?
The players or the GMs voted him as the best leader in the league, or the best captain, or whatever it was a year ago. So
I think he does. I think he does, and I think that when you've seen it this year with what he's done, holding them through the injuries and what they've done in the bubble, I think this is the perfect example of that he's capable. Now, are there some roster construction problems on the team that I still think could be better around him? But look at how Nurkic has blossomed under playing with him, how great they are in the pick and roll together, and how much better. I will say a lot of things. We got to credit Dame's plays even been better now that he's had Nurk back, and that's been a reason for their success. Now I still think he has some defensive shortcomings that point guards generally of his size sometimes get a pass for, and I think he could be better on that. But I think his ability to lift players and make them better, yes. I think he's proven that, honestly. I think it's more now, Jarod, about the talent that goes around him. But if he doesn't win and the talent doesn't get better, then I don't feel like you can just lean in on the loyalty narrative around stuff in Portland. At some point, you have to be like, hey, if this guy is elite, well, elite players are supposed to win. They're supposed to get it done. While I agree with the point you make, Jarod, about the narrative of expectations, and I also simultaneously agree with the point that Bryan makes about how you start factors a lot in the people's minds about how things should be, and that's sometimes not fair on either side.
Yeah.
I do also think if you're going to have a standard of winning next to elite, then that needs to be consistent, right? So if you expect these guys who are elite in the league to deliver and win, then you have to hold the same standard for Dame Lillard. That's all I'm saying. And I'm intrigued to see how that plays out.
It's interesting. Yeah. I think that Dame, clearly elite, all NBA, all of that. I mean, no worse than the third best point guard in the league. Might be, that's why the worst word is, right?
He's technically first now because
Curry's not playing, right? But I'm assuming all healthy, right? And the problem is what you do with Harden. Do you call him a point guard or a lead guard? Like it's whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, Harden's his own thing, right? Like,
but Damian Lillard
which is excellent, point guard, right? Which is excellent.
Yeah, and Damian Lillard is
right. What do you do with Luka? You put Luka in that conversation.
Well, right. There's so many guys, right? But what I will say is this, and it's something I've told to Bryan. I think I've said to you as well, Dexter. The only thing that worries me about Portland is their inability roster, and it could be just not wanting to go to Portland. But if Dame is this leader that everybody wants to go to or play with, he should be able to draw guys in, right? My fear always is when your team's leading scorer is a small person. Yeah. In the playoffs, that worries me. Mind you, that worried me about the Warriors, right? Like, let's be real. They've won one Steph Curry-led championship. One. The first one. They lost the second one, whatever he was hurt about.
They were all-time great defensively.
It doesn't matter. They're right. They did not win the second one. And the last two they won, they had arguably the best player in the world on their team, right? So, so that's what that is. So that does worry me. But I want to pivot to this Dame situation and Paul George. So they get in a little back and forth. He says, you're running from the grind, blah, blah, blah. So, I had to dig into this. And the question I want to ask you guys really, well, first I'm going to get into this right now. These guys are relatively more similar than people think, right? Okay. So, Paul George, 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, 4-time All-Defense, steals champs. In 8 of his 9 seasons, he's made the playoffs. 2 conference finals, 1 second round, 5 first-round exits, right? That's Paul George's career. Dame, 5-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, Rookie of the Year. 6 of his 8 seasons in the playoff. 1 Western Conference final, 2 second rounds, 3 first-round exits, okay? They're relatively the same as it relates to playoffs, right? You give George 1 extra coup because he got 1 extra conference finals, and you give Dame some more because he's been past the first round more times than Paul George has, right? Okay, fine, cool.
Paul George got there in the East. That also matters.
Okay, but if you're going to say that, you can't be also like, LeBron wins at 9 straight, right? That was the same time LeBron was going to the East as well, right? Like, getting to a conference finals is hard, period. End of story, right? Like, okay.
Sure.
Now,
but he also did it in the East, and I'm saying comparatively to Damian Lillard, who did it in the West.
Okay, and as I said
to you, get more points for that.
As I said to you in the group chat, they beat a OKC team which that team was not good. We know that, right? A team that wasn't very good, and they beat a Denver team, took them 7 games, which nobody thinks that Denver team was good last year, right? They were playoff neophytes, and then what happens? They get swept by the non-Kevin Durant Warriors, right? Like, so again, talking about Dame and how good he is, you went head to head with the guy who you think he's close to, he gets swept, 4-0. And actually shot terribly and got killed by Steph Curry. Outplayed. I'll look at the stat, by the way. Head-to-head. Not good for your boy Dame versus Steph. Those numbers don't look
Steph
good.
Hasn't seen this Dame yet, though. That's the thing.
Brian.
It's different now. He hasn't seen Dame post 40-foot whatever shot. And I wanted to touch on one more Dame thing. Like, when we're talking about this, you guys are saying that at some point he has to win. And I think as long as he stays in Portland, he probably doesn't have to. In terms of changing the perception of what he is, it's all like we talked about how it's all great. It's been gravy to this point. It's probably going to be that way for the rest of his career.
And that ties into the anchoring effect, right?
If he stays in Portland, he doesn't need to win for us to look back and be like, oh, he was overrated or he wasn't.
But then the question becomes, though, like Dexter mentioned earlier, are we judging him correctly? If we then say he's now an elite and one of his generations correctly, we're not being fair by then saying, well, how come you're not winning, right?
Yeah,
because you know who we're saying that about? James Harden. Why aren't you winning, right? And you, Brian, would say Damian Lillard is on par with James Harden, yes? And that's what we asked James Harden. Why aren't you winning? Why aren't you winning? That's the question.
People are going to go back to perception because what people are going to do historically is, all right, one guy went to Arizona State, was 3rd overall. The other guy went to Weber State, never heard of him before that. He was 6th overall. One guy out the gate was on a great team, got to the finals, went to Houston, all-star right away. Damian Lillard, while he was Rookie of the Year, he had a bit of a slow burn to becoming an actual star in the league, like a star-level player. Even though he was good right away, he had a slow burn to getting to, I guess you would call that James Harden level. And what people are going to say is that, okay, he had a team built around him from day one in Houston, from day one from when he got there, and he wasn't able to do X with it, whereas with Damian Lillard, there was still LaMarcus Aldridge there for a couple of years, and then he had a good season where they got to the conference finals. Yeah, but I'm telling you what people are going to say. He got to the conference finals.
Those people saying that it's stupid.
But that's what we're talking about.
All you're doing is holding back onto how something started and not looking at the journey of how it's going. And this is
what people do.
And it sounds like you're making excuses for Dame, right? It sounds like excuse making.
Brian, we know you're not making excuses, but I'm saying.
All right, so don't talk to me that way.
Look, man, don't make me get on my little. No, I'm just. Look, and I want to go back to something Jarod mentioned because you doing the comparative with Paul George, which I think is a really good thing.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into that more in a minute.
Jarod, you missed one important Paul George stat though. One pregnant IG model.
All right, okay, yeah, all right, man.
It does. Listen.
The problem, the thing around that narrative too, I think it's also narrative based, right? Like the numbers, like you said, Jarod, are very similar, and I don't think you can disregard the numbers here. But the narrative basis is looked at as Paul George. Paul George is looked at as a really good to near great two-way player. Mm-hmm. So there are more expectations out of him and what he should or should not have done in his career. Paul George, of recent times, has had some disappointing moments in the playoffs, including last year against Damian Lillard.
Should have picked him up at 40. Should have picked him up at 40.
Right. He didn't do that. He got Jade, and Dame gave him the wave, and the rest is history. People look at, to your point, Jarod, people look at Dame, and this goes with the starting point, is he's gotten the most out of, or the Portland's gotten the most in terms of value out of him being the 6th pick and ascending to this kind of player that we say that he is. Paul George, while he also was a great value pick, if you look at where he was picked,
for sure,
that's a value pick. People look at him as this two-way player, and the two-way players are what really runs this league, and you expect so much more out of him. And most people will say Paul George is a really good number 2, but Dame is an alpha. And so this also comes back to my point. The alphas, the number ones, the great leaders, as everybody has ranked them in this, they're supposed to be the ones that lead to champions, which is the criticism we always have on James Harden too, right? So you can't conveniently, well, clearly you can. You can't conveniently switch the narrative in how you want it for one player and how you want it for another player. I think there's more expectations on Paul George because there's been more pressure on him because of his skill set. But I also don't think Damian Lillard gets to skate by and not have that pressure as well. And I think that's why, while your point, Jarod, well, not your point, but looking at the numbers, yes, it is close. It isn't as much of a disparity as people thought. But people are going to view now Paul George in this light, which Damian Lillard kind of brings up, in that he's been jumping teams to try to chase the championship.
But that matters, though.
So here's the thing.
That matters in terms of the perception. That matters, and also Paul George is bigger. Going back to relatability, he's just a bigger dude, so people are gonna judge him that way. And you're gonna laugh at this maybe or find this ridiculous, but this is important. Paul George, very easy to make fun of by comparison. Nobody really messes with Damian Lillard. He could rap. He gives off that he's a tough guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he backs up what he says.
Put some respect on my mother effing name. Yeah, all that.
And Paul George, people kind of think he's soft.
He likes to fish. Well, here's the thing. So I was looking at them statistically, right? Advanced stats are actually pretty even, right? So George is a significantly better defender, right? Like that's clearly obvious. Lillard's actually, looking at the advanced stats, he's slightly better on offense, right? Not a lot better, slightly better. Offensive win shares, counting stats, Dame is definitely clearly better in those things, right? True shooting, effective field goal, are essentially even. Playoffs per 100 possessions, offensive rating, identical. And on defense, Paul George is better. So the question I think we have to ask is, or we're really asking, who is better at their job? Is PG-13 a better B mic? Shouts out to the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Then Dame is an A. And how do we measure that?
Wow, that's a really good question.
How do we measure
Paul
that?
George a better? Well, here's the thing.
Okay? Hold on. Are you asking me what would I rather have? Like, would I rather have Paul George as a B or Damian Lillard as an A? No,
because I think I know that. I think you want Lillard's your A. I know that. It's more who was better in their.
I don't know that I know.
Who was better in their role? He might be the best B in the league. Like,
yeah. Well, no, Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Although he's like an A- kind of.
Yeah.
He's not.
Really.
That's what. But you see how you talk about Anthony Davis? I don't talk about Paul George in that way. Paul George is not like, he's an A- at his best, but over the course of his career, I guess people have just failed to see him, even in his Indiana days where he was like giving it to LeBron. But back then it was all gravy. Paul George had this too because he's from Fresno State. He's not from a big basketball school. He was a 10th overall pick, not in the top 5. He was picked 10th, and Damian Lillard was 6th. You know what I mean? In different drafts.
So you know what? So here's the question though. And I want to get back to Dexter. You have a point you want to say about who's better. What's a better role? Who's better at their job? Does Kawhi Leonard impact how we think about these guys? Another guy not drafted high, right? Came out of San Diego State. Homie could barely shoot when he got to the league. Now you could literally make an argument he's the best player in basketball. Like, all gravy for him at this point, right? Because Kawhi's already cemented himself, yes? He don't got to do nothing else.
He's got 2 championships. He could retire right now. He'll be first ballot Hall of Famer.
I mean,
he has two championships that he won. Finals MVP. He won, and 2 different teams. One of them where he didn't necessarily. People don't see this as running from the grind because he went out and actually won the championship.
Yeah.
So the winning sort of changes everything there, whereas other guys haven't done that.
Yeah, here's the thing that changes. Here's the thing that changed for Paul George. I'm glad you brought that up, Bryan. And Jarod, you're kind of leading to this. If Paul George wins the championship this year, the narrative totally shifts. He wins one with Kawhi, people started looking at him differently. Not saying that he's an A. Not saying that he's an A. I don't want to put it on that. And you're right. I know what you're about to say, Bryan. I know it so well. Bryan's going to say it depends on how he performs in the playoffs. And he's right. It does depend on how he performs in the playoffs.
Chemistry, baby.
If Kawhi carries things and Paul George disappears again in a crucial game 5 or game 6 or something like that, people are going to start to look at that. So performance does matter, right? Let's not act like it doesn't. I think Dame Lillard, to the question you asked, Jarod, again was who's better at what they do, right? Like sort of Dame Lillard at the A role or Paul George at the B supporting player role. I feel like the jury's still out on Paul George because we haven't really seen him excel in the B role. We saw him fail in the B role with OKC, right? Like he had a really good year last year and he got hurt at the end and he wasn't an MVP running and he played good, but we're talking about his shortcoming in the playoffs.
But you did say he was hurt, right? Those shoulders were hurt.
He did say that. And to be fair to him, but we have seen Dame as an A make big-time iconic shots in the playoffs. Right? Big time shots in playoffs where we look at him as, oh, if the ball's in his hands in the last second, we feel like he's going to do it. Now, he hasn't won, but we do look at him as this clutch guy, and you know how NBA fans love
and that's so funny. I love that.
And people also, like, the perception is that Damian Lillard, by comparison, has actually pushed his team to its limits because of what they have around them in a tougher conference too, in the Western Conference. Whereas with Paul George, again, the jury's still out, like you said, Dexter, on whether or not he could be the B guy, because the playoffs are going to determine the answer to this question.
How much?
Yeah, I think it is. And one thing, Jarod, I'm going to say is I just want to say I think this is a big year towards determining that answer to that question.
I agree. For both of them. For both of them.
For both of them. Yeah. I think that's fair for both of them. Go ahead, Jarod.
How much of Dame's legacy or this belief that, and again, I'm not saying he isn't. You know me. The thing about basketball is it's such an emotional game to play and for us to watch. Because while we are journalists, we are also fans. And so what I'm trying to do, and it's difficult, is divorce emotion from it, right? Like, and look at this as objectively as I can. We ain't talking about Durant, so I ain't in my feelings, right? So we're all good. But it's this idea of how much do you guys think that shot Dame hit with the wave goodbye in everybody's mind is like, again, we talk about, is that championship worth 2x? Was that shot to go to, mind you, the second round, was that like worth 10x? Do you know what I mean? Like in the way people saw it, and when they recall how great Dame is.
But when it comes to just legends across any sport, having an iconic moment matters. Or having in rap.
Can you have an iconic moment in the first round?
Yeah, I think so, because of just having the balls to take that shot. Like, everybody, like, I was watching the game and I'm like, what the fuck is he? Oh shit! And it goes in.
but
you know what I mean? So I think what people are gonna look at that and see is like, yeah, he has an iconic moment because the shot, just for him taking it first of all, and then making it in the way he did. Yeah, I think people are gonna hold that up, because there are certain players where, as good as they were, you probably don't remember any moment that they had. Like, I think Ray Allen getting the shot that he did in Miami was big, because even though he had a great career leading up to that, which Ray Allen moments were you really going to remember before that, other than maybe him winning the title in Boston?
I mean, I love Milwaukee Bucks Ray Allen. He was so good.
Ray Allen's one of my favorite players ever, but I'm just saying, like, those moments matter.
Here's the thing. I wonder how much that moment, it's a great shot, an iconic shot. I'm talking about the Ray Allen shot in NBA history, but, well, you know what also matters in that? They won the championship. And I think that matters a ton, right? And so I'm wondering, I agree with you, Bryan, that the iconic shots matter, but I think the question Jarod is kind of raising is, what level does it matter depending on what comes next and what happens, right? Yeah, and I'm gonna bring an analogy, like where you see a moment happen and you think it could spark a team into something else, you think it'll do something. This is baseball, so we're going off of this. But remember in 2006 when Andy Chavez made that catch for the Mets and he flies into the wall? Mm-hmm. Nobody could have told me in that moment as a Met fan that would have propelled them to win the championship. But they did it, and while that's a great moment, it doesn't become an iconic moment because they didn't win. Had the Mets won, I think it would absolutely be a baseball iconic moment, but they didn't win. David Tyree catching the pass from Eli Manning on his helmet. If the Giants don't score there, it's not an iconic moment in the Super Bowl. But they did score, did win, and I think I will say it's a little different with basketball to some degree, Jarod. So I do want to give myself some pushback. We remember, well, that's not a good example. I was going to say the Jordan shot over Elo, but that won a series.
It did.
For them, right? And winning.
Dame got to the conference finals.
Dame got to the conference finals, and I think it's an iconic shot in the NBA. But I think it matters more to his legacy, which is what Jarod brought up. If he eventually wins, it becomes part of the folklore and part of that legacy. So I think if he doesn't win, maybe people don't remember it.
And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. That Jordan shot over Elo, but that's part of the whole Jordan mythos and mythology, right? That's the grind to get to the sixth title, never losing the final. Right. It becomes, if he never won them chips, anybody care about no shot over Craig Elo? What does that matter, right? Yeah, and to stay on your baseball analogy, you mentioned the Andy Chavez catch. Who could forget that? You know, it was a two plays that, in my mind, and I'm going to get Yankee fans mad at me, but whatever, that I thought were clearly overrated. This is Derek Jeter, and they won a championship both those years. The ones where he runs the one where he ran into the stands and fell in and caught the ball and like came out with his face bloody.
That was a regular season game,
right? Yeah. But it's like the myth of Derek Jeter. That one and that flip was so overrated. It was overrated.
It's
the A series, yes. So overrated.
Which I don't even think he needed to do it, but whatever.
Did he need to? Probably not. That's a fair point.
And so, but
the ball's going to the catcher.
It fits into the mythos. And again, we talk about Dame based on that shot. Which, by the way, again, to have the temerity to take it shot number one and to then make it is huge. But we talk like Dame is a proven playoff performer. These don't tell me he's a proven playoff performer, right? On the biggest stage against your rival, who Bryan would argue at their peak are not that far apart. Bro, you got shitted on. Like, right? Like, so what is
proven? What is proven? Like, what does that actually mean in terms of this conversation?
If I'm thinking proven, I'm thinking a team or I'm sorry, a player who consistently advances in the. I'm not, we're talking about conference semis, conference finals every year, and they're putting up their numbers and they're dragging their team. They're not getting swept, right? They're going 6-7 every time, but for whatever reason, the other team is just slightly better than you are.
Jarod, what if somebody comes back at you for the example that you just brought up and says, "Hey, well, Dame had to do so much in the first two rounds that he was exhausted by the time he got to the Warriors." Or are you not giving a pass for that? And you're like, look, you got to perform.
I mean, well, okay, if we give him that pass, and that's okay, because I often use that point when I talk about Harden, right? I'm like, because here's a dude, he gets to the conference finals. It ain't like he's getting swept in round one, right? He gets to the conference finals. Yeah, everybody looks at him like, nah, he trash. That dude is this. And I'm like, but the man gets his team to the conference finals, right? Like, yes, he cannot beat the greatest team of all time. Like,
right.
Okay, I get it. I get you on that. But
you know what though? It also goes back to the whole people's champ theory. And with James Harden, he would never, ever, ever, ever be associated with that by anybody. No. He just wouldn't because his play style is ugly. A lot of people
can't stand him. Why you gotta crap on his play style, man?
No, it's true. Like, his play style's ugly to watch.
I don't think it's
by comparison.
Ugly to you. Ugly to you.
By comparison to
No. Listen, I think they're both artists. I think they're both artists. They're just different kinds of artists.
Most people would agree with you. And again, we're talking about perception. This is largely about perception. So I'm talking about most people.
Overrated.
A lot of people, but this is what drives this whole thing, right?
Why does it have to do that?
Because we're
talking about it.
No,
because this whole thing is about.
Because we get talk shows where people go, "Is this person better than this person?" Because that's why. Because we got the
perception's not reality until everybody makes it about perception, right?
But with James Harden, it's like he would never get that. So people are not going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's just not as likable.
Benefit of the doubt. Bingo.
Yeah.
Because I could argue.
Not gonna look at it.
I could argue Harden's a more proven playoff performer than Damian Lillard is.
He is, though.
I mean,
I don't even understand how. I don't even see how that's arguable.
Yeah, actually. but to Brian's point, I bet the average lay person would be like, "Nah, he trash." Like,
they're wrong,
right?
I don't even have to look. I don't have to look at the numbers to know that. Like, James Harden has had one bad playoff moment. James Harden has had one bad playoff moment, and if we were being fair to him, since that moment, we're talking about what year was that? 2015 against the Spurs.
Oh, that one.
That one. Outside of that, after that, he's been very good in the playoffs. Sure, I think Jarod, you make
but with a noticeable drop off in the playoffs compared to the regular season, which people are going to point out.
Which, by the way, again, Brian,
people want to pick and choose what they're going to do in the what they're going to judge in the playoffs and the regular season.
Everyone in the history of basketball, except for 3 people, have worse shooting percentages, worse points per game. All their numbers go down in the postseason, except for 3 dudes.
I know that, but the common person does not know that, so they're going to pick and choose, like, okay, this is how we're going to judge it.
You know why that is?
Again,
because
the perception matters.
Better competition all the time.
Right,
they have
the
people
perception
game plan for them.
Again, you're trying to rationalize with irrational people. With James Harden,
I'm actually annoyed talking about the irrational people. like they don't even deserve to be mentioned.
All right, but Jarod's asking the question.
I know, I'm not mad at anybody. I'm actually mad at irrational people. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that most people think more, look into stuff deeper more, have conversation with nuance. Listen to the stuff that we're talking
Exactly. About. Nuance, people.
I mean, we'll see. But when it comes to that, like, that's how people are going to look at it. They'll pick and choose their battles, and again, they'll look at, okay, who has? I mean, yes, James Harden has more playoff success, but again, he doesn't have the playoff moment that Damian Lillard does. People are going to hold that, apologize because of what it is. That playoff moment, again, matters in this conversation because, one, neither has won a championship. Neither has taken a team to a finals. James Harden was in the finals, but he didn't take his team there.
No doubt.
So people are going to use that against him too. And that's just what the perception is. He doesn't have like a super memorable playoff moment. The moment that he probably has is when he and the Houston Rockets didn't make a three for that second half that they coughed up the game. And that's where he gets the reputation as a choker because that has happened with James Harden more than once. Whereas with Damian Lillard, the label is that, oh, his team just got outplayed because look at who they played against. Even though Kevin Durant was out, the Warriors, again, they were the best team in the league before Kevin Durant even got there. So that's going to be the convenient argument there as well. And then with Damian Lillard, it's like, yo, he has CJ McCollum and Nurkic wasn't really the way he is playing now. So what's the difference there is that. It's just the drop-off of all of these things sort of metastasizing into what we're talking about.
I love this stuff, man, because this is what sports is about, right? It's sort of, on the one hand, you have the people like Bryan are talking about who it's all perception and they don't want to dig into nuance. It's literally shifting the narrative and moving the goalposts every time to fit their arguments, right? Versus just looking at what everything objectively says, which is why I say take my emotion out of it, right? Like, I don't, Dame, there's nothing about him that I'm like, ooh, I hate or I like. I can objectively be like, that dude is an excellent player, one of the top players in the league, period. Like, right? But I can also say, all right, looking at this head-to-head, he doesn't have a lot of playoff success, right? Based on what I see, right? That's it. And I feel like that is such a hard thing for people to do. It then becomes, well, it's because of this, and this. I'm like, I didn't ask why. I'm just saying, look, but here's the reality. Like,
in fairness, though, his teams haven't been as good either in Houston. Now, I don't know how much he's to blame for that, but his teams compared to Houston and James Harden's teams, if we're doing the James Harden, Damian Lillard thing, his teams just haven't been as good. Like, them even getting to the conference finals, albeit like they got there and got swept by the Golden State Warriors, getting there was even a surprise because remember what it took to get there. They had to win a Game 7 on the road against a good Denver team. Like, yes, people didn't take them seriously as a contender, but people thought Denver was going to win that series against Portland.
I didn't, but
I
yeah,
a lot of people did. Mainly because I didn't trust Denver's young because they weren't. I was like, I don't trust these dudes. I don't.
But there were people who picked them. Don't get me wrong. You're not wrong about that.
Yes, before the series, and especially again, Game 7 at home in Denver, where we know about the altitude and all this, and Jokic is becoming a star. And Jokic again, little guy beating big guy. People will factor that into the David and Goliath thing as well.
No doubt.
Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, who had a great Game 7. And the highlights are some of the best that you could see on YouTube. I've gone back and watched that a few times because he just plays such a great game. But them taking down Nikola Jokic and Denver in altitude, like, look at what we're talking about. Whereas their biggest moments is like, yo, they're actually overcoming the odds here. They're actually surprising people. And with James Harden, he's not necessarily allowed that because his team is always starting the top of the season as championship contender. They've been a championship contender in most people's minds for at least 5 seasons, and they still haven't gotten there. So, yes, that's going to be held against them. Whereas Portland's never had that.
The anchor effect.
Portland, it comes back to that.
Portland's never had that. But here's the thing. I can't say that it's totally unjustified, though. Like, yes, it's probably unfair to Harden, and it's probably generous to Damian Lillard. As they could probably meet in the middle somewhere as to where this shit should be graded. But I don't think it's totally unfair because when you really dig deep and we're talking about nuances, the variables matter when it comes to this team does underperform because they're championship contenders, and this team, we didn't expect much out of them, and they do surprise us.
Variables matter, but I don't think it should be dominated by, in our decisions of looking at stuff, totally by narrative. And we do this a lot in other things, even with like the MVP race. It's like, who had the best story arc throughout the season? It's like, no, I really feel like it should be who's most valuable to their team.
No doubt.
If you took this guy off this team, do you think they would have these numbers or reach these levels? But some people, they fall in love with the story. And I'm a storyteller. I love storytelling.
We love stories.
but don't fall in love with it to the point that it doesn't make you look at the facts.
No doubt. So I got a question as we wrap here. it probably wouldn't happen this year just based on the seedings. But if there was a redo, Denver, Portland playoffs, the teams this year, who's winning that playoff series this year? These two teams.
Oh, that's good. I'm taking Portland, actually, man.
I think I would.
I think I would. Like, the way Nurk is playing, and they have depth with Whiteside even off the bench, who, I'm not the biggest Whiteside fan, but in that role, he's good. And the way Melo's playing I just think it's funny. We talk about proven playoff performances. I think they have more guys who've been to a conference finals. They have guys like Melo who's been to a conference finals. Whiteside's played in the playoff. They have guys I'm like, no, I trust them more than I would still trust Denver. I think it'd be a hell of a series. I think it'd probably go 7 again, but I'm taking Portland, man.
I would still say.
Go ahead, Brian.
I would still say Denver is an all-around better team on paper right now. I mean, because I don't know what to expect out of certain dudes, but it all comes down to, for me, how much rope is Michael Porter Jr. going to get in the playoffs? How much rope is Bol going to get in the playoffs?
Bol ain't getting much in the playoffs.
Yeah,
MPJ might get a little bit more, but he starts messing up on defense, Malone's going to yank him quick.
And he probably will because
he's young. He's a rookie.
And the playoffs are a little different. Like, he gets Damian Lillard on a screen, and it's over.
Help!
He's gonna, Damian Lillard's 32 feet out. He's gonna be like, all right, I'm just gonna sag. Whoa, what the fuck? And then it's a 3-pointer. You know what I mean?
By the way, if Michael Porter Jr. does that, I'll be like, bro, you don't watch film? You ain't scout? Put your hands up at least, dog.
Like, busy making up coronavirus conspiracy theories.
He needs to put his energy elsewhere.
Oh man, this is a great conversation. Obviously, always love chopping it up with you guys. The one thing I'm looking forward to as we wrap here is the playoffs. Just real quick, and then your reasoning as to why. What do you see as the championship, and who takes it home?
Go first, Bryan.
All right, fine.
He's waiting to put me out there.
So it's funny too because I looked up. I was like, "Is he gonna talk first?"
I was like, "Nope."
You're like, "Nope."
But
nope.
I'm not moving off the Lakers. I've stuck with them all season as them being my pick. Yes, I would probably feel more comfortable if Rajon Rondo were healthy throughout the bubble and if Avery Bradley was on the team. However, I do think J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters has actually had some moments. So, I do think those guys are going to help them. And for me, it just comes down to a couple of things. One, going back to Portland, are they really a contender for the championship? As much as I think they could knock off any team in the West outside of the LA teams, and I think they could give them both a series, because Damian Lillard actually creates a big matchup problem, especially for the Lakers. But I just am not moving off the Lakers because I think LeBron is just like, he's LeBron at the end of the day. He's motivated. No doubt. That matters. Anthony Davis is playing as we expected, probably better than we expected, to be honest, throughout the course of the season. He looks like an all-defensive player of the year candidate, and he's probably going to get on one of these two all-defensive teams.
100%.
LeBron's been rejuvenated on defense to some degree throughout the course of the season. I'm not going to say he's going to make an all-defensive team or anything like that, but in watching him, he's definitely more active on defense than I've probably seen since maybe that first year where he returned to Cleveland from Miami. So I think that both those two guys are just going to carry the Lakers all the way into the championship. And then in the East, oh man, like, I'm not ready to jump out on the ledge and say Miami's gonna beat Milwaukee,
but they might.
I think, and I'm glad.
Come on, you want to say it? Come on, man, just say it, man. Come on, man.
I'm glad you guys have seen the light when it comes to Miami.
Listen. I've been seeing the light. Listen, come on, calm down.
Okay, but in partial seriousness, I'm disappointed that the Sixers are not gonna, Brett Brown. He might get another life raft and coach again next year. I don't know what's gonna happen there, but Ben Simmons is out. Joel Embiid, he keeps he's like who's the quarterback that's questionable every week? Ryan Tannehill. He's like Ryan Tannehill, where every week you look up on the injury report and he's doubtful, he's questionable, whatever the case may be. I don't really feel that comfortable going with Milwaukee, to be honest with you. I actually like the Raptors. I like the Raptors right now.
Wow.
The Raptors are a team that I didn't love coming in because I thought Kawhi had more of an impact than apparently he did. Either that or we're seeing the impact of Kawhi right now in the work ethic and things of that nature. But they're defending their championship. They have that championship DNA, and I think there's something to that because they've all been there. It's kind of house money for them, and
can't
they
tell
know
them
how
shit.
to go.
Can't tell none of them shit.
Can't tell them nothing.
In a way that Giannis, like, I just don't like. It's weird, but I don't really trust Giannis that much in late games in the playoffs. I just don't.
There's nothing weird about that.
And I think, you know what? I'm just gonna say this. I think Miami will beat Milwaukee. I'll just go there.
There we go.
Do it. Yeah. Go ahead, Playboy.
7-game series, but they fucked them up. I mean, last game without Jimmy Butler, they had a great first half, and then it petered out in the second half. But they really give it to this team.
No
and
doubt.
Bam is the guy in the East where it's like him.
You can guard Giannis one-on-one with no help.
Yeah, that they can guard Giannis and, give him problems if nothing else.
No
so
doubt.
I think we'll
Make
get
him
Raptors Heat conference finals, then Raptors Lakers in the finals, and Lakers winning the whole thing.
Love it.
So,
go ahead, B.
What's interesting with this is Bryan and I, I've been with the Lakers all year. I have a little bit of concerns about them. Haven't liked how the offense has looked. I think they'll be better once they get Rondo back. There's some stat I saw that they're 15-0, and Rondo scores at least 10 points in a game. He just another ball handler who can distribute and get it to stuff and take some pressure off LeBron. A lot of playoff experience. I think that'll get better. Kuzma's actually looked pretty solid in these seeding games, so I'm excited about that. He just needs to calm down and not be all up in trying to be on an all-drip team. He's got to calm down on that. But I think he's been fine. Crazy enough, Bryan and I have the same pick. I've been sitting about this for a while about the East. I'm not confident in Milwaukee for the reasons I think a good defensive team, a la the Raptors or possibly the Heat, not as good as the Raptors, they can make life hard for Giannis. And are all those other guys around him, particularly Eric Bledsoe, are those guys going to make shots? The best thing you could have if you're trying to defend the Milwaukee Bucks is a possession ending with an Eric Bledsoe 3. That is a win for the defense. That's what you want in the playoffs. And so I think that needs to happen. Look, I think this Raptors team is good, man. I think they're
so
good.
Deep. They're so deep.
They're so deep. They have a lot of length. They defend at a high level, and these dudes look to something that Bryan said. Bryan talked about that championship mentality. They look like, we came here to win. They were down in the bubble early. That's why I think they've looked better than a lot of other teams. They've been together quickly, and I think that's gonna translate. They are like, look, we're here to defend this title. This wasn't all about Kawhi. I'm not going to be somebody that said Kawhi didn't have a lot to do with it because obviously he hit an iconic shot that also propelled them to winning a championship.
They got there because of him, yeah.
Got there because of him, no doubt about that. But Siakam's grown up. I like that team. I trust them more than I do Milwaukee right now. And so I'm with Bryan. I wouldn't be surprised at a Raptors,
Lakers.
Heat conference finals.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't shock me. Now I don't know what that means for Giannis and the Heat and the Bucks and all that, but it wouldn't shock me. Look, I think this is hard to pick, Jarod. I'm going to go stick with the Lakers. I think LeBron is on a mission. I think LeBron is going to be focused to get this done, and he's going to will his way to get this done. But let me be clear. I do not think it'll be easy. The Clippers are hard. The Clippers are deep. The Clippers are good. They haven't played greatly in the seeding games, but I think they're starting to round into form. And a lot of it's going to come down to something we talked about earlier. Playoff P. We got to see Playoff P, man. Playoff P, if he get it done for the Clippers, he's going to have to step up. And so, Jarod, I know you picked the Clippers, but you need your boy Playoff P to come through, man.
Wait a minute. How's he my boy all of a sudden? Look, here's what I will say.
Because you picked the Clippers.
I mean, yes, preseason.
And Damian Lillard did say his best moment was in a commercial, which is fucking hilarious.
Preseason, I picked Sixers, Clippers, finals, and Clippers winning it. Obviously, the Sixers have disappointed me yet again, so we'll get to the Eastern Conference in a minute. Look, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. What did I say?
I said pick the Sixers. Just do it.
No, please. I can't do that. The Clippers, to me, still, there is a level that squad can get to defensively that no other team in this league can get to when they are clicking on all cylinders. And we saw a little stretch of it last night against the Nuggets. The Nuggets didn't score for 3 minutes. Right, and that wasn't even them fully cranked up. But they came out of the halftime because they were down 6 or 7 at the half. They came out and were like, all right, let's start playing for real now. And literally for 3 minutes, they were like, don't let them score. And they couldn't. And in the playoffs, if you have stretches like that where you don't score, that's game, right? And again, I know what LeBron and AD are, and I know what that pick and roll, how devastating it is. But I trust the Clippers others more than I trust the Lakers others. If you telling me Kyle Kuzma's got to be a reliable person in the postseason, Mr. All Drip, nah.
That
I ain't down with that. Now in the East, I said the Sixers. I picked them in the preseason, but they disappointed me. But I was also loving this Raptors team all year. You know, I love Siakam. Look at Boucher. I mean, Kyle Lowry's that kind of dude, man. Where like, and I hate
my
this
kind of guy.
Of course he's your, and I hate this.
He's your kind of guy.
I hate this term, but his impact doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. But I hate that phrase. But you know what I mean. But you know what I mean. I mean, Kyle will throw his body around. He don't give a fuck. And the Miami Heat, whether they beat the Bucks or not, that series is going 7. Okay. And
I can see that.
Jimmy and Bam, they're going to beat the hell out of them dudes. All right? Now, Giannis is tough, all that. I get it. But it's going to be a war getting out of there. So if they make it past Miami in the second round, they're going to be battered coming in to play Toronto. And let me tell you, Toronto ain't going to be scared. And to your point, Dexter, house money. If the series is Toronto up 3-2, you know who nervous as fuck? Milwaukee. Toronto cool. They're like, we won a chip last year, so we all right. Like,
and
so,
and if that happens, sorry to cut you off, Jarod. If that happens, you know why I like Toronto in that? Because they're not going on the road. We all here in the bubble. We know where you stay, and we gonna see you walk into the arena shook. They ain't gonna walk into the arena shook because there's nothing they can do with virtual fans to scare that Toronto team.
Nothing.
And I think that's an advantage too.
Huge advantage. So all that work Milwaukee did to get that number 1 seed and home court advantage ain't gonna mean shit. And again, to your point, if the shot clock ends and it's Eric Bledsoe and even as good as Dante DiVincenzo played this year, he is a rookie, right? Like young people or unproven people in the playoffs that's got to make crucial shots. I'm not saying it can't happen because obviously Toronto players did it last year, right? But I do not trust this squad. And again, the pressure's going to be all on Milwaukee because number 1 net rating, number 1 offense, number 1 all the things. And all of a sudden you're down. And when we know, okay, wall off the lane. Don't let Giannis come in there. Let him shoot jumpers. Look, he shoots them, but will he make them when it counts in the postseason?
And that's something I want to ask real quick before we wrap. Who do you trust more in the playoffs to get a shot? Like, not just get a shot in general, but in the last minute of a game, let's say, between Pascal Siakam and Giannis, who do you trust to play better in the last minute of a game? I'm kind of leaning Siakam.
It might be Siakam.
In terms of the playoffs.
It might
be.
But
you know why? The reason why I feel like both you said that, and I agree with both of you, is that what you're really saying is you trust Toronto's defense more to get a stop, because I feel like it's the other way of looking at it, right?
Yes. But I also think Siakam could create a better shot too, because
against Milwaukee's defense, which is a great defense in terms of net rating, but the eyes tell me Toronto is going to have a better game plan to stop their number 1 than Milwaukee would have to stop.
Because you know what your eyes also tell you? Nick Nurse will actually do something different if his first plan is not working.
Doesn't work.
Mike Budenholzer has not told you that, right? Because the Bucks' defensive strategy is we will let certain people shoot. That's what their defense does. Their defense gives up threes, but nothing at the rim. But it's who they want taking threes. Certain people taking those threes. Look, man. There's 3-point shots are high variance. Okay, that defense may work, but guess what? Dudes might just start hitting threes all of a sudden. You might say, okay, I'm going to let Chris Boucher take threes. Yo, Chris Boucher all of a sudden is shooting 40%. Well, it's over now, buddy. Like, that's the series.
And the thing with Giannis, when he's going to be one of the guys where I'm going to pay attention to, because he's not going to be officiated the same way in the playoffs as he is in the regular season, where he gets a lot of calls, and he's not just going to be able to bulldoze his way to the rim like he does in the regular season against dudes when he's playing against the Raptors, because they're going to be able to throw a lot of Chris Boucher, Norman Powell, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, Pascal Siakam, keep going on down the line. They're going to be able to throw different guys at him, and he's just not going to be able to get you that kind of shot, which leads me to believe who's creating the shot if you need one, like if you need that step-back mid-range two-pointer at the end of a shot clock. Giannis isn't giving you that. Jimmy Butler is going to give you that. Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry.
Gotta be Middleton.
I even feel good about Fred VanVleet doing that, but Milwaukee, it's just.
How many big shots did VanVleet hit in the postseason last year? In the finals. Yeah. So these guys ain't scared.
Cold for most of the
right.
playoffs.
These dudes ain't scared. So I'll wrap it as this. So I think it'll be Clips, Raptors. I'm gonna pick the Clips because again, I don't think anybody can beat them. I don't think anybody can reach their level of defense when they're all clicking. Here's the other thing, something to leave you guys with, and this will hit home with Bryan. So
is it about violence?
It kind of is. So
what a shock.
Giannis is insanely competitive, like insanely. I don't know if you guys watch him. How he's wired.
I like that.
So you notice how at the end
so far
that end of that game the other day, he just headbutted Mo Wagner, just like fuck it. Like Giannis has this thing, I think, where if you can kind of get up under him a little bit, you can fuck him up. And you know who's gonna do that to him? Jimmy. Jimmy might just get up under him a little bit, and because Giannis be fouling out of games, like he just be because he wants to win so effing bad.
I can see that.
Like it could send him off. I'm not saying anything's gonna happen. All I'm saying is I am watching that in the postseason.
Yo, Brian's eyes on. He's like, Jimmy's my guy, and Jimmy's gonna get under this skin, and he's gonna have Giannis headbutting everybody.
Here's the thing: there are very few things that I enjoy more than pissing people off, and Jimmy Butler.
Punching people in the face would be one of them.
Yes.
People.
And Jimmy, no, I like pissing people off more. I'm not a violent man with the hands no more. You know, you gotta retire when you gotta retire, baby. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you just gotta. You know, sometimes you just
nobody believes that.
Yeah, nobody believes
from
that.
the ring to ring side. You know what I'm saying? But but with Jimmy Butler, like if he blows Giannis a kiss, it's over. Like it's over. He's gonna charge into Bam Adebayo twice. He's gonna be in foul trouble, and it's over. Like that's all it is. And Mo Wagner, shame on him for selling the hell out of that headbutt. God damn. I thought that was a WWE match.
I mean, he sold it, but it's just I think
thought he should have got fined for that.
I just think there's something there where you can Giannis. He teeters. He's right on that edge, and I think if you got the right guy, you can get him to
See, the experience matters there too, because like LeBron, you're not getting to him that same way. Like he knows how to channel that. Kawhi,
Kawhi ain't even gonna talk to you. You like whatever.
Yeah.
Like
I think Damian Lillard.
I was gonna say that you're not gonna get to him. Like
you're not gonna get.
And while that competitiveness is great for Giannis, and I think Giannis will figure this stuff out.
Yeah, he will. He's young.
He figures out in the playoffs and how to adjust to these defenses. You're right. You make this great point, Jarod. It's something to definitely watch in the playoffs. Can he be even keel? Can he rise to the moment? Because part of rising to the moment is being even keel. Mm-hmm. I think that's why all the players you mentioned, Bryan, just now, Kawhi, other people, they're able to have that. And it's like, yo, you have to have aggression, but you have to know how to channel that. Aggression is good when used smartly. Using your head, not the headbutt other people.
I'm working on that too.
We know. Please. Folks, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. We hope to do more of these and just, put nuanced conversation out into the ecosystem. Not these hot takes you find on channels that we won't mention right now. For Bryan Fonseca, Dexter Henry, I am Jarod Hector. I'll see you guys next time.